Welcome to the NBAV podcast. Welcome back to another episode of NBAV and the NBA Avenue podcast. The Klay Thompson saga continues to the tune of 35 points coming off the bench in his very first game as a bench player for the Golden State Warriors. And I know what you're thinking. This goes against the narrative that I've been talking about on NBAV for the last couple of episodes, right? We've been talking about how Klay shouldn't get credit for saying that he's going into the next phase of his career. And then, in the last game, Klay Thompson had a couple of blunders that really cost the Golden State Warriors the game. So it showed that he didn't really mean what he said. Well, now he is backing it up because he's coming off the bench, and he scores 35 points. So things are on the uptick for Klay Thompson. But if you dive into the numbers a little bit deeper, or well, really not deeper, if you just look at it surface level, Klay Thompson scored 17 points at halftime, and then he had a monstrous third quarter where he scored 18 points. And that's all of his points because he actually didn't score in the fourth quarter. So where he scored 35 points in the game, he scored all 35 points in the first three quarters. So you're looking at that and you're thinking, hey, Klay's going to drop a 50-piece in a Warriors runaway victory. That wasn't really what happened because Klay Thompson played for 9 minutes and 38 seconds in the fourth quarter. So Klay played for nearly 10 minutes in the fourth quarter after scoring 35 points in the game, and he didn't score a single point. So in the fourth quarter, when the game matters the most, Klay Thompson was highly ineffective. He was a -7. And of course, all of their players were really in minus territory because the Warriors gave up their lead in the fourth quarter. But a lot of that has to do with where Klay Thompson was so good for three quarters, he wasn't very good in the fourth. And that's really the most important part of the game. But I think we're at the point where it doesn't really matter to Klay anymore. And this was kind of where the narrative was trending anyway, where you can make the whole thing about Klay. And my point is kind of, it's not really about Klay. Meaning it's not about what Klay says, because Klay is going to end up playing a bench role, or at least playing a secondary role, regardless of how he interprets his future, regardless of the player that he believes himself to be. It's not up to Klay to make sure that Klay doesn't hurt the Warriors. Klay is going to play like Klay. He's going to do Klay-type things. And I did see some interesting analysis from one of the great coverage guys who covers the Golden State Warriors, where he was talking about how Steph has a release on his shot where he doesn't really use his legs too much. He doesn't get high off the ground. Whereas Klay Thompson typically has to get very high off the ground. And in this game, he lowered that a lot. So he was saving his legs by jumping off his legs less, saving his legs a little bit more. And then this was able to translate. But then again, it didn't really translate because in the fourth quarter, when it mattered most, he wasn't able to get any points in that quarter, right? The most important quarter of the game. But if he can continue to adjust his shot as he gets older to using his legs less and his upper body more, perhaps that could be a way that he's going to be able to keep his scoring up and slow his decline as an aging player. But regardless, it's not really about Klay Thompson. It's more about Steve Kerr. And will Steve Kerr make sure that Klay Thompson doesn't hurt the Golden State Warriors? And it's going to be about identifying, okay, right now in the first three quarters, Klay's doing really, really, really well. So we're going to leave him out there, and he's playing great basketball. He's coming in with the second unit. He's able to hit his shots with relative ease. It looks nice and smooth. It's a good night for him, and we keep him out there. And then when it's not going well for him in the fourth quarter, how quickly can you identify that and pull him out of the game? And that's a tough job because when a player scores 35 points in three quarters, you're going to think that it's not the right move to pull him after a couple of ineffective minutes in the fourth. But that's why this job is really the tough job for Steve Kerr, because he needs to make those decisions. And then you have the other decisions of, well, it's a night where it's clearly not going well for Klay Thompson from the start, and maybe that's an easier decision where you just move away from using Klay Thompson a lot earlier in the night. But this is not as much, I think, a story about Klay Thompson as it is a story about how Steve Kerr is going to use him. So yeah, the story, in a sense, is about Klay Thompson, but Klay Thompson shouldn't be the decision maker here, and he's really not, because Steve Kerr is going to have to put Klay into his reduced role one way or the other, and it's just a matter of, is Klay going to be happy about it or be unhappy about it? Or and it doesn't even really matter if he's happy or unhappy. It just matters how he plays and how effective he is in the way Steve Kerr is using him. But it's really going to come down to, at the end of the day, Steve Kerr. Now, the Warriors did hold on for the victory, which is the most important thing. They definitely could have blown the game, but regardless, it doesn't really matter. They're heading into the All-Star break. They won 6 of their last 7 games, and they're ready to keep building off that coming out of the All-Star break. There's quite a bit of time until they come back, and they're able to come back with sort of a fresh start, right? They're going to be still a game and a half back of the Lakers, right? The Warriors are in 10, and they're aiming to get to that 7 or 8 seed, right? The 7 or 8 seed would give them 2 cracks at staying in the playoffs, and that's more than enough for the Warriors with this currently constituted team with some stars on it, with Steph and with Draymond, and with some other pieces, and hopefully with Chris Paul coming back at some point, and hopefully gelling with the current roster. So Warriors got to be happy with what they've done recently, although it's been somewhat of a disappointing year, but who knows? Maybe it won't even end up mattering when it's all said and done. If the Warriors can get in as a 7 or 8 seed, end up facing a team like Minnesota in round 1, hey, you might have to go with the Warriors in a series like that. So we'll see what happens with them, but they've got to be happy heading into the All-Star break. We had a game that played right before that, which was the Bucks completing their free fall into the All-Star break. I made this analogy previously, but similarly to the way that the Philadelphia Eagles this past year fell into the playoffs before they got eliminated by the Buccaneers, the Bucks, the Milwaukee Bucks, don't stumble into the All-Star break. They free fall into the All-Star break. In absolute catastrophic fashion, they complete it in the greatest way they possibly could have, which is they lose to the Grizzlies. And to add insult to injury, they lose to the Grizzlies, who were playing without their best player. No, not Ja Morant, who was already not playing, not Desmond Bane, who was already not playing, but without their third best player, who was their current best player, who's available, which is Jaren Jackson Jr. And that puts this G League team to its complete, full final form, where the star of the night is G.G. Jackson. He's legitimately the best player they have on the floor, and the other players that they are reliant on are Vince Williams Jr., Santi Aldama, Trey Jameson, Zaire Williams, Jordan Goodwin, Lamar Stevens, Jacob Gilyard, Utah Watanabe. That is the roster that they put out there in this game, and the Grizzlies complete the incredible victory. And what the Grizzlies did, and what's so impressive about G.G. Jackson, is not just that he's giving you points in the game. It's not just that he's shown to be an effective scorer, but as the youngest player in the NBA, he's also giving you an added element of being a calming presence. And the Bucks were about to take that game near the end. They came back, they were ready to win it, and this was where a typical bad team like the Grizzlies, a typical bad team like the Wizards, like the Pistons, this is where they give up the game in the final few minutes. That's the typical way a G League team that played a good game loses, is they play a good game, and then in the final few minutes when things get a little bit tighter, the more experienced team with the better roster steals the game. But that's not what happened here, because G.G. Jackson, after scoring a lot earlier in the game, they turned to him in the final few minutes, and after the Grizzlies couldn't get a bucket for long minutes and minutes at a time, long stretches, he was the steadying force, sinking a couple of massively important three-pointers and calming things down and keeping the Milwaukee Bucks at bay. Not only did he score 27 points in 30 minutes, but he finished out the job and he closed out Giannis and the Milwaukee Bucks. I don't know exactly what all of the problems are for the Milwaukee Bucks. I heard one theory that Damian Lillard lost a bit of his quick twitch quickness, and that's hurting them, which could be, but one thing that I definitely noticed watching the Milwaukee Bucks is that when they're on defense, when Milwaukee's on defense, and they close out on a three-point shooter, and the three-point shooter takes the ball and instead of shooting, drives to the basket, they almost always get a wide open dunk or layup. The defense doesn't collapse into the middle of the floor quick enough to prevent the layup or dunk. Whereas if you watch what the Grizzlies were doing, is when someone gets run off the three-point line, the defense collapsed at a much faster speed. And I've seen this happen in many games for the Milwaukee Bucks, where they don't have that closing speed on defense collapsing towards the middle of the floor, and they give up a lot of easy layups and dunks, and that makes it really tough. They also give up a lot of three-pointers, but that's another story, that another point that they have to fix. So there are two big ones right there. Not giving up the wide open layups and dunks. They've got to have a quicker rotation back to the center to prevent those layups and dunks, and then also they got to eliminate the wide open three-point shots. And when you're playing against the Grizzlies last night and their best player on the floor is Jaren Jackson, you would think that they should be a little bit more mindful of that in the fourth quarter and take away the number one option. I know that the number one option in this case isn't Steph Curry, and the number one option isn't Gilgeous-Alexander or Nikola Jokic, but on the given night, the number one option was Jaren Jackson, so you have to be mindful of that and you have to take that away. But the Bucks complete the absolute free fall, and they could not be in a worse situation heading into the All-Star break. But thank God for the All-Star break, because maybe out of this come a new beginning for them, a rebirth, and maybe in the second half of the year, they can get the ball rolling again. They're still in the 3 seed, so they will have the rest of the season, the final. How many games are there? If they're 35 and 21, that's 55 games. So that means there are 27 games left. So in the final 27 games, they'll have the entire thing, all 27, to try and figure it out. And they'll still be a top 5 seed no matter what they do in these final 27 games. So they have the luxury of time. Time is on their side, and they can figure it out. In the only other game that we had last night, the Timberwolves beat the Trailblazers, and we're not going to go into any detail on that. That's just what you would have to expect. I think there are some festivities happening tonight, February 16th. There's some sort of Rising Stars challenge, which is just silly. Nobody should really care about that. I just hope that nobody gets injured. That would really be the travesty of having a game like that where a rising star would lose their NBA career before signing a big contract, before getting their guaranteed big money. That would really be just a horrible, horrible travesty. And then we have the festivities coming up on Saturday night, right? We have the slam dunk competition where you're going to see Mac McClung go back and defend his title. He's going to win it again. Nobody should kid themselves into thinking that he won't. He has been looking at this contest for the entire year. I don't think Jaylen Brown's going to get it. And I don't think that, contrary to the belief of some Celtics fans and some Celtics media, that Jaylen Brown is going to lead this revolution to where stars and well-known players are going to start wanting to participate in the slam dunk contest again. I think this is really just a one-off where he may make a fool of himself, or even if he doesn't, it's going to be sort of a one-off. And Jaylen Brown is making star max contract, top of the world salary, but he's not looked at as a star like Steph Curry. He's not on that level. He's not looked at as a LeBron James, and he's not going to have that impact that a LeBron would if LeBron entered the slam dunk contest. And then the other participants are going to be, Obi Toppin's brother, Jacob Toppin. It's going to be probably about as interesting as when Obi Toppin was in it, which is not that interesting. And the only other one is we have Jaime Jaquez, who, for as great of a player as he's been, and as great of a rookie as he's been the whole year, doesn't really strike me as an incredible dunker. I think Mac McClung is going to take this very easily. He's going to really mop the floor with all the competition, and hopefully Mac McClung doesn't hurt himself in tonight's Rising Stars game, where he'll be representing as part of the G League players, and hopefully he gets to show what he can do again in the slam dunk contest. He'll take the back-to-back crown, similar to when Nate Robinson did that as a very undersized player when he was part of the New York Knicks. And then we're also going to have the 3-point shootout, right? So we can see some of the 2024 Starry three-point contest. What is Starry anyway? Is it just another version of Sprite? Can someone explain that to me? With Starry, is it sounds like Sprite almost. It has a lemon, it looks like Sprite. Another Sierra Mist. I mean, what are we really getting from Starry? I don't know. I don't get it. You have Malik Beasley, Jalen Brunson, Tyrese Halliburton, Damian Lillard, Larry Markkinen, Donovan Mitchell, Karl Anthony Towns, Trae Young. Yeah, I think it's a pretty easy one. I think Damian Lillard's going to get it again. He's going to win it again. He's just there's something to taking the ball off the rack and being a pure shooter versus guys who like to dribble into it. So I think Lillard has a big advantage there. I don't think any of the big guys are going to get it, but they have these 4-pointers here, so it becomes a lot of it based on the 4-pointer, so maybe Trae Young will have a chance. Doesn't really matter. Nobody really cares about it too much. And then you have the All-Star Game, which also nobody's going to care about. You have the Celebrity All-Star Game, which is funny sometimes to watch the highlights, but nobody's really going to sit there and watch that entire game. In terms of other headlines that I wanted to talk about, there's one thing that some people were bringing up about Wembanyama being considered for Defensive Player of the Year. And let's just stop it. Wembanyama is in a similar place to Chet Holmgren, where these really tall, skinny guys get a lot of blocks, but they give up a ton of points against bigger, more filled-out players, right? Didn't Joel Embiid score 70 points, with most of it coming against Victor Wembanyama, or at least a large percentage of it? How many times has Joel Embiid scored 70 points in his career? Once. Who was the primary defender on him that one time? Victor Wembanyama. So let's give it a rest with this Defensive Player of the Year nonsense from Wembanyama. Give it a couple of years, and he'll get his Defensive Player of the Year. We don't need to use our imagination to create the award in his name, to give him the victory in this category before he really should be in consideration for it. You could be excited. You could be looking forward to what's to come. But for now, he's just going to be getting in his lumps. Victor will take it on the chin this year with the San Antonio Spurs. Maybe he'll win Rookie of the Year, but otherwise he won't have much to show for it, and he's just going to have to be patient and work on his game, and all of the awards and accolades will come for him in the future. Considering that we only had the 3 games going on last night, and we don't have any games to look forward to for the next few days, right? Today is February 16th, so we have nothing on the 16th, 17th, 18th, 19th, 20th, or 21st, and we'll be back on February 22nd. But don't worry, we're going to find all sorts of topics to go through over the ensuing days, throughout the All-Star break, past the All-Star game, and until the NBA action is back. So don't worry, NBA Ave and the NBA Avenue podcast will be with you the entire way. Rain or shine, season or off-season or postseason or All-Star break, we'll be there with you. You can follow us on social at NBAV and NBAvenue, and you can email us at nbavenue@yahoo.com. That's nbavenue@yahoo.com with your questions and comments. We are your source for a great time every time, and until next time, we are out.